She saved every dollar for a life-saving surgery, until two dirty cops stole it in broad daylight. What they didn't know: her son was coming home, and he wasn't coming back as a soldier. He was coming as a storm. If this is your first time here, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your city, your country, we love hearing from you. Welcome to Mr. 7 Stories, where true justice is never quiet. And if powerful, gripping stories like this move you, hit that like, subscribe, and follow button so you never miss another one. Now, let's witness the chilling story of Damien Moore, and the reckoning that made an entire town remember one name. That afternoon in Monroe Falls, Louisiana, the sky turned to a heavy shade of lead, like a bad omen cast over the town. The air was thick and oppressive, pushing through the narrow streets and slapping against the moldy, decaying walls of Elmside's residential blocks. It was the kind of neighborhood people only passed through when they had nowhere else to go, and where the law often turned its face the other way. Lillian Grace Moore, 69 years old, stepped out of the First Horizon Savings branch with trembling hands clutching a faded canvas bag. Inside were $4,300 in cash, tucked neatly into old envelopes, every last dollar she had managed to save over the past 20 years, all for one final wish: to undergo heart surgery so she could live long enough to see her son come home safely. Her hair was white as ash, thin as silk, draping over shoulders worn small by time. Every step she took felt like it carried the weight of a lifetime of struggle. That bag didn't just hold money, it held hope and the fragile thread of life still beating inside her tired heart. She had just turned into Garland Alley, a shadowy, half-forgotten lane few dared enter at this hour, when the screech of tires shattered the silence. A black and white patrol car skidded to a stop in front of her. She froze, heart pounding erratically in her frail chest. Two officers stepped out. The first was Detective Raymond Slater, tall, buzz-cut, a face hard as concrete. His eyes were ice-cold, like a man far too comfortable crushing people's dignity. Behind him followed Officer Dale Huxley, lankier, twitchier, with a grin that curled like a jackal feeding behind a lion. Slater approached, hand resting lazily on the sidearm at his hip. "Withdrawing a bit much today, aren't we, ma'am?" he said, voice dragging with mockery. Lillian clutched the bag tighter to her chest. "It's for heart surgery. I haven't done anything wrong." Slater squinted. "A black old lady carrying nearly $5,000 in Elmside? That smells suspicious to me." Huxley laughed sharply from behind. "What is it? Drug money? Lottery winnings you forgot to report?" "No, I work as a nanny. I clean houses. I saved every cent." "Shut your mouth," Slater snapped. Before she could say another word, he yanked the bag from her arms. The force of it sent her staggering back, spine slamming into the cold brick wall. Her heart, already fragile, felt as if it had skipped a beat. "Asset seizure, suspicious funds," Slater declared like a judge delivering a sentence, pulling an empty evidence envelope from his pocket and stuffing the cash inside. "Please. I have my hospital papers. My surgery is scheduled next week." Huxley shrugged, bent down, picked up a crumpled 20 that had fallen in the struggle, and slid it into his own pocket like it was business as usual. "Buy a coffin, Mrs. Moore," he sneered. "Saves time." The patrol car screeched off again, wheels spinning through the dust and smog, leaving Lillian Grace Moore collapsed in the alley, surrounded by crumpled bills strewn like dead leaves at the end of a dying season. No one helped her. No one looked back. There was only her gaze, red-rimmed, soaked with tears, staring into a void that offered no mercy. With trembling hands, she fumbled for her old phone, pressing a number she hadn't dared dial in years. A fragile voice cracked the heavy dusk air. "Damien, I need you." The phone buzzed softly in the chest pocket of a worn military jacket as Damien Moore sat hunched in the back of an armored transport truck. The hot wind of Djibouti's desert whipped by, carrying sand and the acrid stench of burning fuel. It was supposed to be the final day of his final mission. After 13 years in the Green Berets, he was scheduled to return to the US in less than a week. But that buzz, and the name, Mom, flashing across the screen, instantly silenced everything around him. Damien narrowed his eyes, palm tightening around the phone. His mother, Lillian Grace Moore, never called at this time. In fact, she rarely called him directly at all, unless it was life or death. His breath caught, heavy as if the entire African sky had just collapsed onto his chest. He swiped the screen. "Mom." On the other end, the sound of wind whistled through shaky breaths, followed by a broken sob, soft, but piercing like a bullet to the heart. "Damien, I need you." Her voice was so faint it could have been carried off by the breeze. Damien instantly straightened, his right hand gripping the steel railing of the truck as a storm surged in his chest. "What happened? What's wrong?" His voice was low, tight, stretched to its breaking point. They took it all," Lillian choked. "My surgery money, every last dollar. They wore police uniforms. They said I wasn't allowed to have that kind of cash, then just stole it." Damien closed his eyes for a single second, jaw clenched as if swallowing back a roar of fury building in his gut. "Cops?" he asked again, already knowing the answer. "Yes. One was named Slater, the other, Huxley. You know me, Damien. I've never done anything wrong. I just wanted to live long enough to see you again." Her voice completely broke. Damien opened his eyes. They were sharp now, blade-like. Every noise inside the truck disappeared, replaced by the pounding of his heartbeat, loud as a war drum. He looked out toward the horizon, past the dry ridges, past the endless desert sands, toward a place far removed from war. He spoke into the phone, each word a vow. "I'm coming home, Mom. Don't be afraid. I'll take care of it." Then he ended the call. No extra words. None were needed. The entire truck fell silent as Damien leapt from the back bench and strode toward the command tent. The desert wind lashed his face, but his eyes never blinked. A young soldier opened his mouth to speak, but fell quiet the moment he saw Damien's eyes, those of a man who had nothing left to lose. He pushed straight into the tent, where Captain Harrington was reviewing redeployment logs. "I need to leave in the next 12 hours. Family emergency. Urgent." "Moore, your discharge isn't official for another 3 days." Damien cut him off, his voice forged in steel. "Captain, I'm not asking. I'm informing you. I'm leaving." And just like that, the theater changed. It was no longer about a war in Africa. No longer about enemies with rifles. A new battle had begun, in Monroe Falls, where law had rotted into a weapon wielded by those in power. This time, Damien wasn't coming home as a son. He was coming back as a nightmare. 15 hours later, the final Frontier Air flight touched down at Louis Armstrong International Airport under Louisiana's brooding midnight sky. Damien Moore stepped out of the terminal without a suitcase. He didn't need one. The only baggage he carried was a quiet, relentless rage and one unshakable mission: to wipe out the men who dared lay hands on his mother. An aging rental car rumbled along Highway 61 for 3 hours, before veering off onto a cracked concrete road leading into Monroe Falls, a small town decayed to the bone. Beneath its sleepy exterior lay a bottomless pit, where men in uniform treated the law not as duty, but as dominion. Damien drove past Precinct 12. Its weathered sign barely legible, its porch light flickering like a warning or a countdown. He didn't stop. Not yet. A good hunter never strikes before the prey forgets it's being watched. He checked into a roadside motel called the Red Lantern, 5 miles out from town. The room was cheap, damp, wallpaper peeling like old scabs, but it had what he needed: anonymity. At a splintered wooden desk, he opened his laptop and connected a small device from his wallet. A secure hard drive loaded with personnel data from Precinct 12, quietly gathered through old military contacts. Detective Raymond Slater's file popped up first. 14 years of service. No official complaints. Familiar words. Because abuse of power always gets erased before a complaint reaches paper. But Damien wasn't looking for what was on paper. He scrolled to the unofficial section. Leaked internal notes. A suspect with cracked ribs after an interview. A black man found hanged 12 hours after release. A young boy detained for non-compliant behavior. All connected to Slater. Next, Officer Dale Huxley, the hyena behind the lion. The man who smirked while his mother was robbed. He was the type who never got his hands dirty but always benefited from someone else's violence. A shadow that fed on silence. Damien's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about balance. Damien tapped an old number into his phone. A familiar voice answered almost instantly. "You're back. I need eyes inside. Fast." There was a pause on the other end. "Damien, you're not here to warn them this time, are you?" His voice didn't waver. "No. I'm here to end it." The call ended. Damien stood up, buckling the strap of his watch. His gaze caught the mirror. Staring back at him was a man with steel in his eyes. He wasn't a soldier serving a flag anymore. He wasn't a son hoping for home. Now, he was the reckoning come to wipe out whatever rot dared masquerade as justice. And Monroe Falls would soon learn, some men don't come back for justice. They come to end the game. At 3 a.m. in the Red Lantern Motel, the world outside lay as still as if Monroe Falls had stopped breathing. But in room 5, Damien Moore was wide awake. On his laptop screen, Raymond Slater's profile glowed, ID photo, commendations, and a string of exemplary performance, notes polished in law enforcement language, swift resolution, effective use of compliance techniques, community stabilization in high-risk zones. Words dressed in the clean fabric of a uniform. But Damien knew better. Behind every accolade was a bruise, a strangled cry, a life shattered in silence. He clicked into encrypted internal notes, raw data, discarded investigative reports, mysteriously corrupted footage, retracted witness statements. But one file made him pause. Tyrone J. Baker, male, 21. Arrested for public disturbance. Injuries noted: 3 fractured ribs, minor cerebral hemorrhage, temporary memory loss. Released the next day. No charges filed. The case marked with a bold red line. Resolved, no misconduct found. One more click, and Damien opened the medical records folder. There it was, X-ray scans, physician notes, and an anonymous voice memo. "I saw that kid. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing outside the corner store, earbuds still around his neck." Then a white SUV rolled up, Slater stepped out, and within 20 seconds, that boy was on the ground. Damien sat motionless. It wasn't a new story, but what made his brow furrow was the note tagged at the bottom of the internal review. Victim no longer in local jurisdiction. Current whereabouts unknown. Beaten within an inch of his life. No charges. No compensation. No justice. Vanished like he never existed. Damien picked up his phone again. This time, he called someone from his past, Jamil Torres, a hacker who once helped their special ops unit track deserters and war criminals. "You up?" Damien asked. "Never sleep. What do you need?" "I need to find someone. A ghost." Tyrone Baker. Former victim of Raymond Slater. Last seen in Monroe Falls. Jamil's voice came back. Lazy, but sharp as ever. "Give me 15 minutes, and a bowl of pho on your tab." 12 minutes later, Damien had a location. A converted warehouse on the outskirts of Baton Rouge. The sky was still a murky gray when Damien arrived. The rusted metal door creaked slightly ajar. Inside stood a lanky young man, his face still bearing the ghost of past violence. A faint depression on one cheekbone, a scar that healing never fully erased. Tyrone Baker stepped forward. "Who are you?" Damien didn't waste words. "I'm the son of Lillian Moore. Slater just stole every dollar my mother saved for heart surgery. I need you to tell the truth." Tyrone froze, his eyes widening. She was the one who helped me recover. She used to come to the hospital. Brought soup. Prayed over me." Damien nodded. A detail even he hadn't known. It clenched his chest tighter than any battlefield ever had. Tyrone was silent for a long moment, then finally said, "Slater beat me because I wouldn't hand over my phone. I just wanted to listen to music. There's no law against that, right?" "Not in this country," Damien replied, voice cold as steel. "But in Monroe Falls there is," Tyrone muttered. "I left because I knew staying meant dying slowly." Damien placed a recorder on the table between them. "Would you be willing to say that again? On record?" Tyrone looked at the device, then back at Damien. He nodded once. This time, I won't stay quiet. Slater never saw it coming, a living witness. And Damien had just found his first match to light the fuse beneath a man the system had always protected. 3 days later, as the harsh noon sun sliced across the faded tile of Precinct 12 Monroe Falls PD, Damien Moore walked through the glass doors like a man entering enemy territory. No sneaking. No hesitation. This was not the time for shadows. Behind the front desk stood a young female officer, about to speak when a low voice cut through the still air behind her. I'd recognize that walk anywhere. Raymond Slater emerged, pressed uniform, tight tie, black shoes polished to a mirror sheen. Hands in his pockets, mouth curled in a crooked grin, the kind worn by men who think they've already won the game before the first move is made. Moore, right? Damien Moore. The Green Beret. Son of Miss Lillian, the Patriot. He let the last word drip with false reverence. Damien didn't answer. His eyes scanned Slater's face with surgical precision, calm, calculating, and sharp enough to slice through Kevlar. Slater was ready. Or at least he thought he was. Slater stepped in closer, each stride deliberate, predatory. I heard your mom ran into a little trouble. That's unfortunate. But you know we have laws here. And we enforce them. You don't enforce anything but fear, Damien replied, voice low and even, each word slamming against the tiled floor like a hammer. A few officers looked up from their desks. None stepped in. They just watched, waiting. Perhaps they'd been warned in advance. Slater sneered, stopping inches away. The cheap cologne and stale tobacco on his breath curled in the air between them. I read your file. Syria, Fallujah, Somalia. Prime places to learn how to kill with a badge of honor. Damien narrowed his eyes. Slater was testing him, poking, baiting. You know what I really learned out there? Damien tilted his head slightly. That the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with a gun. It's the one with a badge and a rot that stinks deeper than any trench. Slater smirked. Nice line. You'll have time to recite it again, in your arrest report. He spun on his heel and barked. This man just threatened a law enforcement officer. Log it. Immediately, Officer Dale Huxley emerged from a nearby office, flipping open a notebook and pretending to jot notes. Another officer reached for his radio, fingers hovering, ready to call in backup at a moment's notice. Slater was laying a trap. Provocation. Entrapment. He wanted Damien to explode. He wanted to twist a grieving son into a threat to public safety. But Damien had fought real wars. Years on foreign soil had taught him how to breathe through bullets, how to wait for the true shot. His discipline was carved into bone. He took a single step back. I didn't come here to make a move, he said loudly, his voice cutting through the room. I came here to make sure you all know, I see you. See what? Huxley jeered from the side. I see you rob my mother. I know you, Slater, beat Tyrone Baker within an inch of his life. And I see this whole department covering for filth in uniform. The air thickened. No one moved. Slater's jaw clenched. But before he could spit out a response, Damien turned his back, walking toward the exit. No shouting. No violence. No mistake to use against him. Only a parting shot. Next time, I'm not here to talk. The glass door clicked shut behind him. Inside, Slater roared. Surveil him. Round the clock. He's now a level 1 threat. But Slater was wrong. Damien Moore wasn't a threat. He was the verdict, and it was coming. Damien Moore stepped out of Precinct 12 like a man who had just walked out of hell, not because of fear, but because he knew the door behind him wasn't just an exit. It was the mouth of a beast cloaked in law and order. And like any true soldier, he didn't rush into enemy fire. He retreated to strike back. Rain began to fall. Each drop hit the pavement like a drumbeat, warning of a war to come. Damien didn't look back. He pulled out his phone and dialed a short code. Jamil, I need access to Precinct 12's internal cameras. Past 24 hours, max. What are you planning? Jamil asked, voice filtered through background synths and static. Find the blind spot. And from that blind spot, I'll open a door. After the call, Damien stopped at a rundown auto shop. Its sign barely legible, John's Auto and Metal. The owner, John Adebayo, was a former EOD tech Damien once served with in Afghanistan. Now, John lived under the radar in Monroe Falls, fixing carburetors, and occasionally dealing in things that weren't exactly listed in the yellow pages. "I need a stealth drone, infrared cam, and a tapped police band radio kit," Damien said without pause. John raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "Been a while since you came back." "Still cold as ever, huh?" "Hotter than C4, Damien replied. Less than 2 hours later, he had everything he needed. Instead of returning to his room at the Red Lantern Motel, Damien climbed onto the roof of the second floor, rigging a makeshift mobile signal station disguised inside an old water heater tank. From there, he could intercept radio chatter, monitor surveillance feeds, and trace patrol routes around Precinct 12 without stepping foot inside. By nightfall, he moved like a shadow. The mini-drone skimmed low across the station's roofline, mapping every heat signature within a 600-foot radius. An infrared camera was stealthily mounted onto an air duct atop the building across the street, giving him a clean line of sight. Within 36 hours, Damien had built a full tactical map of Precinct 12, every blind angle, every shift change, every patrol rotation. And in that matrix of movement he found what he needed, a 12-minute blackout. Every night, between 2:03 and 2:15 a.m., Sector 3's camera servers were manually rebooted, creating a surveillance dead zone. 12 minutes. Not long, but for Damien, it was enough for an entire mission. He highlighted the window in red and outlined his approach. A main route, to create a diversion. Flanking entry, for insertion. The exit path, through the rear lot and blind corner. On his laptop screen, one name sat dead center, Slater. His photo pinned like a bullseye in a sniper's scope. Damien tapped the enter key lightly. A swell of orchestral music filled his headphones, the same symphony he used to play before every assassination mission in Syria. Not for drama. For control. It steadied his hands before the trigger pull. 3 floors up, inside the dimly lit office of Precinct 12, Raymond Slater sat alone under a flickering desk lamp, its yellow glow casting sunken shadows across his sleepless face. On the surveillance screen in front of him, Damien Moore appeared, still, silent, sharp. A silhouette honed like a blade. Slater rewound the footage from 3 nights ago, the night Damien left the station. He watched each footstep, every glance, measured, methodical, like a man mapping a battlefield rather than making a complaint. Slater gripped the mouse tighter, eyes narrowing. He knew this type. Not loud. Not reckless. But once they lock in, they never let go. He'd memorized Damien's file, Green Beret, former tactical advisor in Syria, trained in prison breaks, anti-ambush maneuvers, crowd control, and evasion. The kind of enemy you couldn't out-arrest or outstage. Not with a warrant. Not with a cover-up. Slater muttered under his breath, "You didn't come here to get your mother's money back. You came to tear down everything I built." And that's what kept him awake. Not knowing what Damien was doing. Just knowing he was doing something. So tonight, 3 nights since Damien had stepped out of Precinct 12, at exactly 2:03 a.m., during the scheduled security reboot Slater himself had authorized months ago, he made his move. No police reports. No legal procedures. He called in the Spectre Unit, a covert kill team known in the shadows of New Orleans politics, used by city officials who needed their problems to disappear. Their leader, Kane Maddox, a mercenary from Mozambique with a simple reputation, no bodies. No questions. Slater didn't waste words. He's a strategic threat. Name's Damien Moore. I want him gone. Quiet. No mess. 2:05 a.m., a matte charcoal SUV with no plates rolled to a stop across from the Red Lantern Motel, the last known location of Damien Moore. 5 men stepped out. All in black. Suppressed weapons. Cold eyes like surgical steel. They weren't thugs. They were the scalpel you never felt until it was too late. The silence before a throat goes quiet. They spread out in a triangular formation. 1 moved onto the roof. 2 slipped into the alley behind the motel. 1 stood watch near the road. and Kane Maddox, the leader, went straight for the window of Damien's room. What they didn't know, Damien wasn't asleep. He was waiting. No gun. No body armor. Just a man who understood the enemy wouldn't come wrapped in warrants, but in shadows, in silence, in scars. And tonight, Damien wasn't prey. He was the trap. 2:07 a.m. The window of room 5 at the Red Lantern Motel creaked open, just barely, like nudged by the breeze. Inside, no movement. No breathing. No light. Kane Maddox raised his Glock, the suppressor gleaming under a dying street lamp. His eyes scanned every shadowed corner. He saw no one. Nothing. But the silence, it was wrong. Too clean. His men had taken their positions. One was scaling the stairwell. Another tucked low in the back alley. 2 more dropping from the roof onto the rear balcony. "Room's clear," Maddox whispered into the radio. "He might not be here." No response. Just static. The deadliest kind of silence. 2:09 a.m. The streetlights flickered, once, twice, and then went black. No explosion. No alarm. Just a heartbeat gone missing from the night. The man on the roof turned instinctively. Mistake. A thin wire whipped from behind, snapped tight around his throat, and yanked him backward behind the exhaust vent. No scream. No struggle. Just the frantic kicking of boots in midair before everything went still. The one in the alley heard a soft thump, pivoted, just in time to fall straight into the utility pit Damien had uncovered hours earlier and camouflaged with trash bags and netting. 2:10 a.m. Maddox tensed. Something was off. "Sound off, positions now," he hissed into the radio. Still nothing. Then, a soft click behind him. Damien. Dressed in black, no mask, eyes cold as steel. In his hand, a rusted pipe, pulled from the fence behind the motel. He didn't swing. Not yet. He stood there, giving Kane Maddox a single, razor-edged moment to think. His voice barely above a whisper. "None of you are walking out of here with your boots on." And then, in the middle of the night, the moment everything changed. From the door of room 3, a young boy, maybe 8 years old, the son of the motel's janitor, peeked out, his eyes wide, confused by the commotion. Maddox saw him. He turned, gun raised. Damien saw it too. And he moved faster than anyone else. From the rooftop, he dropped like a shadow, landing between Maddox and the child. In one swift motion, his left arm pulled the boy into his chest while his right launched a brutal uppercut straight into Maddox's jaw, bone cracking like gravel. Maddox staggered back, dazed. But before he could find his footing, Damien slammed him against the brick wall, twisted his arm into a lock, and pressed a blade to his throat. "Touch a kid again, and you won't die clean." Maddox thrashed. Damien swept his leg, slammed him down, and pinned his skull to the cement. His voice, low and lethal. "I survived 3 days in a Syrian minefield. No food. No water. You think a few contractors scare me? Wrong battlefield, old friend." Maddox began to choke, blood trickling from his forehead where it struck the concrete. But Damien didn't kill him. He didn't need to. Fear is sometimes a longer sentence than death. 2:14 a.m. Damien dragged Maddox's unconscious body to the curb. The 2 remaining mercenaries, shaking, eyes darting, raised their weapons in panic. Damien didn't flinch. He hurled Maddox's limp form into one of them like a sack of bricks, then rolled right, kicking the weapon from the second man's hand. A swift yank. A crushing elbow to the throat. Like wheat beneath a scythe. 2:15 a.m. Silence again. The streetlights flickered back on. In the distance, sirens began to rise. But by the time first responders arrived, the entire strike team was bound, gagged, and laid out neatly on the sidewalk, right outside Precinct 12, like an unwrapped gift. Next to them, a folded slip of paper, scrawled with 7 words. "They came to kill. I came to teach." Signed only Tim. Beside the note, glinting in the first touch of dawn, Kane Maddox's badge, tucked inside an empty magazine casing. A message. Merciless. 6:07 a.m., Precinct 12 headquarters. The sun had barely broken the edge of Monroe Falls, but inside Precinct 12, no one felt the warmth. The lobby, usually humming with coffee drips, boot steps, and lazy jokes, was now still, almost funereal. The hallway lights buzzed faintly. Curtains remained drawn. The air clung thick with dust, mildew, and something heavier, the weight of a force that just realized it wasn't the one people feared most anymore. Outside the main entrance, 5 mercenaries remained tied up like a living warning, heads bowed in shame beneath the averted eyes of every officer who passed. No one dared touch the note Damien had left. They only glanced, eyes downcast, as if afraid of the shadow of a man no longer on any official record, but present in every breath taken inside the precinct walls. Raymond Slater, still clueless, walked into the station, coffee still hot in hand. But as he entered, every gaze turned to him, like they were looking at a corpse that hadn't realized it was dead. "What?" he growled. "Why the hell are you all staring like I just killed someone?" No one answered. No one had to. Slater followed their stares, and saw the 5 black-clad men slumped outside the front doors, hogtied like livestock waiting for slaughter. Pinned to one of their vests was a handwritten note, stuck on with a thumbtack. Returned, fully packaged. "Don't send trash to fight fire." Damn. Slater froze. His legs moved before his mind caught up, rushing outside, heart hammering as if someone was punching from inside his chest. And there he saw Kane Maddox, once a ghost assassin, now a bruised heap on the concrete, eyes swollen, mouth shut tight. How the hell?" Slater muttered. He stormed back inside and slammed the office door shut behind him. The coffee in his hands spilled across the desk and splashed onto his shirt, not that he noticed. Slater grabbed the desk phone and punched in the encrypted line to Spectre unit. No connection. He tried the secondary satellite line. Still dead. Every line to his off-the-books hit squad had been cut. Damien had severed every escape route. Slater let out a guttural scream and drove his fist into the drywall. Blood smeared across the patrol schedule. 8:30 a.m. Slater sat alone in his dark office, blinds drawn, lights off. No files open. No laptop. Just his hands, trembling now despite his eyes' best attempt to stay sharp. But deep in his mind, Damien Moore was no longer the soldier. He was something else entirely. A shadow that moved without sound. That struck without warning. That didn't leave bodies behind. Only fear. Slater lunged toward the wall safe, spinning the dial with shaking fingers. He pulled out a silver USB stick. A digital copy of every dirty deal, every hidden payment, every name of those who'd protected him from within the system. In case shit goes south, he'd once told himself. And now, shit was pounding on the front door. 9:10 a.m. Raymond Slater slipped out of Precinct 12 through the rear exit. No goodbyes. No reports. No explanation to Captain Wallace. Only carrying a backpack, a Glock at his hip, and the eyes of a man who had just realized the power he'd clung to all these years was never truly his to hold. He wasn't running from the police. He was running from a name he once dared to mock. Damien Moore. 11 p.m. on the eastern outskirts of Monroe Falls, where unnamed roads disappeared into the dark and streetlights flickered only out of habit. Raymond Slater drove a battered sedan, hoodie pulled tight over his head, eyes darting between the mirrors. He wasn't heading somewhere. He was running from someone. Damien Moore. He thought he could erase a soldier. He thought the system would shield him like before. But now, even his own shadow made him flinch. Then, his phone buzzed. No caller ID. A single message. "Don't bother running. I was there before you even thought to flee." Damn. Slater slammed the brakes. A cold sweat bloomed across his neck. And then, the darkness swallowed him whole. Slater woke up in an abandoned warehouse deep in the woods, once a military firing range, now swallowed by rust and cobwebs. His hands were tied behind a chair. The single dangling bulb above flickered erratically, casting a pale, unsteady light over his bruised, swollen face. In front of him, a camera, recording. And Damien Moore, silent, leaning against the wall like a ghost stepped out of wartime memory. "You sitting steady now?" Damien asked, voice low, composed. Slater gritted his teeth. "You got me, so what?" You won't dare leak any of this. I still have people. Damien stepped forward and tossed a thick file down at Slater's feet. Slater looked down. Photos of Kane Maddox, tied up. Audio clips of Maddox confessing. Bank records of the mercenary payment. Video stills of Slater and Huxley robbing Damien's mother. Medical documents from Lillian Grace Moore's cardiologist. And at the very top, a witness affidavit signed by Tyrone J. Baker. You got anything to bargain with, Slater? Damien said, voice like a razor. Or is all you've got left a coward's breath? Slater didn't answer. He panted, shallow and uneven. He tried forcing a sneer, but his eyes were starting to fill with tears. Damien didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply pulled out a military folding knife and placed it quietly on the table beside the rolling camera. You've got two choices now, Damien said, voice level, eyes like twin gun barrels. 1. To confess. Bury your rotten career with your own hands. 2. Stay quiet, and I'll release every shred of evidence online, without a single word of context. Let the world decide what your ending looks like. And trust me, it'll be filthier than any confession. Slater trembled. Sweat streamed down his face. Damien hit record. Talk. 1 beat. My name is Raymond Slater. I was an officer with Precinct 12 in Monroe Falls. I abused my authority to unlawfully seize cash from Mrs. Lillian Moore. I hired men to kill her son, Damien Moore, to cover my tracks. I have assaulted innocent civilians. Primarily black civilians. His voice cracked. He gasped for air. But Damien didn't flinch. Slater hung his head. I thought the law was armor. But I used it like a knife. And I know. I don't deserve forgiveness. Damien turned off the camera. He stood there, silent. No threats. No fists. He didn't need them. The truth had come from the mouth of the guilty. And it carried more weight than any bullet Damien had ever fired. For him, the confession video went live on 3 major platforms, tagged with #Justice for Lillian, #System on Trial, #Slater Confession. Within an hour, Monroe Falls was in chaos. News stations flooded timelines. The police department had no choice but to respond. And for the first time, Damien Moore's name wasn't whispered in the shadows. It echoed as a reckoning. When Slater regained consciousness, he was tied to a rusted metal chair in another abandoned warehouse north of town. A GoPro sat fixed in front of him, recording every breath. A single hanging flashlight cast his shadow, twitching and broken, on the stained concrete wall behind. Damien Moore stood a few steps away. Gloved hands clenched. Eyes devoid of hesitation, more verdict than man. Good morning, Slater, Damien said, his tone as sharp as a scalpel. Hurts, doesn't it? Pain remembers. Slater snorted, trying to summon old arrogance. You'll die for this. I'm a cop. Damien stepped forward. No. You're garbage, wearing a badge. He pulled out Kane Maddox's police ID, the mercenary who tried and failed to end him, and tossed it at Slater's feet. You know who that is, don't you? Slater stared at the badge on the floor. Silent. Damien stepped closer, his voice low but carved from steel. You hired mercenaries to kill me. They failed. And now I'm giving you 2 choices. 1. To confess. On camera. 2. I let the world learn the truth, without ever hearing your voice again. Slater spat defiantly. I'm not afraid of you. Damien let out a quiet laugh. He drew a military-grade folding knife, snapped the blade open, but instead of pointing it at Slater, he slowly sliced the bandage covering his own wrist, revealing a brutal, deep scar. Know what this is? Buckshot. 32 pellets lodged in my arm in Kandahar. I survived that. So tell me again, do you really think you scare me? Slater's bravado cracked. Damien held his gaze and set his phone to live stream mode. He placed it on the table, facing Slater. The whole city's watching now. Slater froze. Damien leaned in and whispered, I have my mother's medical records. I have the audio of you robbing her. I have a living witness. And I have video of your hired guns going down like rats. No one's coming to save you. I don't need to hit you. I just need you to tell the truth. The silence stretched. Slater's lips quivered. Then, on camera, he began. My name is Raymond Slater. I'm an officer with Precinct 12. Used my badge to steal money from Lillian Grace Moore. I hired Kane Maddox and his crew to kill her son, Damien Moore. His voice caught. But Damien didn't move. He just kept the camera steady. I've assaulted black civilians. Repeatedly. Because I thought they were weak. I believed the system would always protect me. A long pause. Then Damien stopped the recording. Thanks for your confession. He unplugged the phone, removed the SD card, and slid it into his jacket pocket. Now, I'll let the law finish what you started. For hours later, the video had exploded across the internet. Hashtags like #SlaterConfession, #JusticeForLillian, and #SystemOnTrial shot to the top of trending charts in less than half a day. Local news stations interrupted their regular broadcasts for breaking coverage. Monroe Falls erupted. And Raymond Slater understood. He hadn't just lost. He had set fire to the very fortress he once ruled. 9 a.m. the next morning, the WLRV live broadcast opened with bold headlines. Officer Raymond Slater resigns following shocking confession video that rocks Monroe Falls. No apology. No explanation. Slater vanished from the system like he had never existed. His apartment sat abandoned. His social media, scrubbed. His phone, disconnected. An arrest warrant went out, but no one could find a trace of him. A man who once believed he was the law, now fled like a criminal. Inside Precinct 12, no one said it aloud. But everything had changed. The air itself felt heavier, hallways once echoing with smug laughter now walked in silence. Jokes had disappeared. Smirks had hardened into glances over the shoulder. And Officer Dale Huxley felt it the most. He no longer clocked in early. No longer lingered with the usual clique in the break room. Instead, he sat hunched in the corner of the records office. Quiet, nervous, avoiding eye contact. Even laughter from a distance made his heart thump like it was a gunshot. Because in his mind, Damien Moore was still out there. No one knew where Damien had gone. But every knock on Huxley's apartment door, every sudden ring of his phone, made his pulse spike. Like a man living under borrowed time. He hadn't been hit. He hadn't been charged. But he was feeling something Slater never did. The weight of being haunted. Over the next week, the culture at Precinct 12 began to shift. Officers arrived on time. There were no more sideways jokes about black citizens. No more grumbles about special authority. Incorrect reports were suddenly corrected. Old cases were reopened without a word from above. No official orders. No new training manual. Only a name, whispered but never said aloud, hanging in every hallway. Damien Moore. No one dared mention him directly. But they all understood. His name was the new boundary. A line you didn't cross. An invisible blade drawn in silence. Hurt the innocent, and he would return. At an internal briefing, a new recruit asked the room, why didn't anyone speak up when Slater crossed the line? Captain Reuben Wallace, the last man in the department still holding on to his integrity, answered without hesitation. Because a system doesn't need good people to survive. It just needs bad ones to never be stopped. He paused. Then added, voice heavy with hard-earned truth. And what we learned this time is that if justice refuses to walk into the light, someone out there will drag it there, no matter the cost. Monroe Falls didn't become perfect. But after that day, no one wearing a Precinct 12 badge dared forget the name Lillian Grace Moore. And none of them would ever forget the shadow of Damien Moore. The man who made the entire system bow. Monday morning, 2 weeks after Slater vanished, Captain Reuben Wallace was the first to arrive at Precinct 12, as always. His routine never changed. Brew a strong pot of black coffee, no sugar, open the daily log, and walk the halls before the others clocked in. But today, something was different. Waiting on his desk was a plain brown envelope. No return address. No postage mark. Just sitting there. Inside, a single white sheet of paper. No signature. No fingerprints. No trace. But the words, made Wallace stop breathing for a moment. I didn't do this out of hate. I did it because no one else would stand up. If another like Slater rises again, I will return, not to warn, but to clean house. At the bottom, no name. Just 2 letters. Thim. Wallace folded the letter slowly, slid it into a separate drawer, and locked it. He didn't report it, didn't forward it up the chain. Because he knew. Some things are meant to remain offshore like a storm, unseen, but always there. In the months that followed, Monroe Falls began to change. Not because of a memo from City Hall. Not because someone passed a new ordinance. But because something had been planted in the hearts of people, a fear and a new awareness. A black resident walked past the police station without bowing his head. A high schooler stood up during civics class and called out a teacher for mocking another student's accent. An ER nurse clasped the hand of an elderly woman and said, "I'll call a lawyer for you." I read about Damien Moore. The story spread, like oil spilled across the surface of a lake, undeniable, permanent. On the edge of town, in a weathered wooden house by the railway tracks, Damien Moore sat quietly on the porch steps, a cup of hot tea in hand, eyes calm, watching his mother, Lillian Grace Moore, moving gently through the garden. She had made it through heart surgery. She was alive. And the tomato vines behind her were finally bearing fruit. "You know," she said, voice soft but firm, "they're afraid of you." Damien didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on the sunlight filtering through the magnolia trees. "They're not afraid of me, Mama," he said. "They're afraid of what I made them look at." Lillian nodded and set down the watering can. "So what now?" she asked. Damien thought for a moment, then answered simply, "Nothing. As long as they remember, I don't need to appear. It's memory of justice that keeps the dark from crawling back." The story of Damien Moore didn't end with gunfire, or sirens, or press conferences. It ended in a silence so deep it echoed, in the minds of those who once thought they'd never have to pay a price. And sometimes, just one person standing up is enough to make an entire system fall to its knees.